And we're good to go. I would introduce you, but I can't imagine anybody doesn't know who you are. You are, as was pointed out by Barron's, the godfather of implantology in America, which sounds pretty impressive.
Well, it was nice of them to say that.
Well, but it's accurate. That's the fun part about it. It is completely and totally accurate. I'd like to go back to the beginning. You're born in Saskatchewan. You end up going to Manitoba. And the question I asked you previously was, do you know everybody in the Guess Who? And surprisingly, you do, or one of the major players, regardless.
Yeah,
Um,
went to school with Randy Bachman, great guitar player, not a very good student.
no, so what'd you say? He went through grade 12, what, three times?
Yes, I don't think you'd like me to repeat that though.
Okay, okay. Well, yeah, I wouldn't do that if I could. So you went to the University of Manitoba, and then you left, and you went to Indiana. Why Indiana?
Well, actually, I left Manitoba when I graduated. I went to USC for a year in postgraduate prosthetics, and mainly to get my California license. And USC was like the Gold Coast of dentistry, the highest quality dentistry was being done in California. A lot of gold foils and inlays and whatnot. So I wanted to do that. Once I had finished that 1 year, I just wanted to get a prosthetic specialty, which requires 2 years of advanced training. So I went to Indiana because I like their dental materials program
Okay.
there. And they were very well known for that. And I went there for a year and a half and got a master's degree in prosthetics. And at the age of 26, came back to California and opened a practice in the San Fernando Valley, a suburb of Los Angeles.
You got married in 64, right?
64, been married 56 years, uh, two daughters, six grandchildren.
Two daughters. That in itself is a record today. That's quite incredible when one thinks about it. Your dad was a businessman. It was interesting. You said before that it's in your DNA. Can you talk about your pops?
Well, he had a small, had a one or two stores in Fort Francis, Ontario, where I was really brought up as.
Really?
Then I went into high school in Winnipeg, but at Fort Francis. And what my parents, immigrants, my dad was born somewhere in the Ukraine. My mother was born in Buenos Aires on her way from Russia to Canada. My
Okay.
parents went to Buenos Aires. She was born, then came to Canada when she was a couple of years. So these are immigrant people that the first language wasn't even English.
Right.
And what they wanted was their children to have a good education.
Right. Right.
So I've got a brother that's a doctor in Ottawa, and both my sisters are well educated, college graduate career people. So my father was very successful in educating his children
Right.
and to teaching us that if we want to make anything of ourselves, we're going to have to do it on our own through education. He knew business, but not the kind of business that any of his children could go into.
Right. Right. So what's intriguing is where did your I'm still trying to figure out where this business acumen, not where the, no, that's the wrong word, the drive to be successful in business, particularly the fact that you went into obviously an area of interest, it was what you were practicing, but you understood the potential for implantology and dentistry. This is back in the 80s.
Actually, I've been doing implants for almost 50 years.
Okay.
1971, when I was 28, I started doing implants, and I just sort of fell into it. I referred a patient. Lower dentures don't stay very well, no matter how good you do it. So I referred a patient to a dentist that was doing subperiosteal implants,
Okay.
expecting to get the case back to build, and he didn't send it back. He said, I don't let anybody build on my implants. So I said, well, I guess I have to learn how to do implants. So in the early 70s, I got into implants, and I really got into it. I attended a lot of classes. I joined the American Academy of Implant Dentistry. I went and spent several weeks at Lenny Linkau's office
Mhm.
watching him in New York. And but by the end of the 70s, I was somewhat disenchanted with the predictability. So they say necessity is the mother of invention.
Mhm.
I was unhappy with the results I was getting. Some worked, some didn't. So I said, you know, if I could just develop two implants to go in the symphysis to hold an overdenture,
Right.
I had good success saving a couple of snaggly teeth with bars. So if I could just do that, I'd be happy for my patients. And I developed the Corvent implant, and it was the first implant and the first case ever documented of two implants freestanding in the symphysis to hold a removable prosthesis. So I developed the Corvent implant. And how did I get into the implant business? I knew that what I had and the concept would be very successful if I could communicate it. There's hundreds of dentists running around with implants in their pocket or ideas that they don't know how to commoditize.
Right.
And so what I did was I sold education. I didn't sell the product. I sold education.
Okay.
And I started running 2-day surgical courses in my office and sold these implants. Like I'd make 500, put in 100 and sell 400 and bootstrap the whole organization with my own money. I just hit, it's a matter of timing.
Yes.
I hit the market just at the time when the Brodemmark implants started to surface and the universities and specialists believed there's credibility to that. And I rode that wave with the really only American osseo-integrated implant, which brought prosthetic versatility to the field, something that the Brodemmark system didn't have. And the response was quite amazing. I remember giving a lecture in New York, one-day lecture. We used to charge $100 for the lecture, and I had 200 registered and 150 walk-ins.
Wow.
So the people were really interested in learning about implants. And I built a network of training centers, you know, Jack Zosky and
Yep.
Alan
Well,
Chaffin
Chaffron.
for our teaching center in Toronto. So I built teaching centers all around the country. Then I did it globally. I went all over the world, established distributors, training centers, and really brought implant prosthodontics to conventional dentistry.
So it's interesting. I guess in doing the research, the thing that keeps jumping out at me is Corvent was the first platform switching implant. If you think about it conceptually, because of the narrow abutment or the narrow. I guess it's an abutment. It's different. It's not really. Is it? It's not hollow. It's a post. Okay. In theory, it's the first platform switching implant when you think about it conceptually.
Well, let me tell you what I think about platform switching. I think that's a bunch of hooey.
Okay.
Uh, that was a marketing concept developed by 3i when they realized that with the external hex, the screws were coming loose. There wasn't much stability. So they said, well, let's make a wider, we'll make a 5 millimeter implant with a wider platform and maybe it'll be more stable. But they didn't have all the 5 millimeter abutments. So they started putting 4 millimeter abutments on the 5 millimeter implants. And then they start saying, oh, look, we've medialized the junction. And that is why we're getting great results. And then Dennis Tarnow jumped on that. And it became a big story. There's studies posted on in my articles section of my website that show there's no difference. I mean, every internal connection, what I really did is I developed the internal connection and that killed the external hex,
Right.
which was considered the gold standard at the time. Now everybody's got internal connections and
Sure.
all internal connections become platform switch because you're coming out from the inside. But really, what's important is the stability of the implant, the abutment implant junction, and that's what the health is all about. And not the little zig in the contour.
Where did you learn? Well, let's back it up for a second. You started teaching courses. You began to deal with things on a world basis. You need to get approval. You need to get. You're working with so many different laws, regulations, building standards, all this sort of thing. You have to hire people. That's no small achievement. I mean, even in of itself, that's like saying you were the Walmart of implant dentistry. That's staggering. How did this happen?
Over time
Over time.
and out of necessity.
Okay. But conceptually, you built this global business. I mean, theoretically, it's incredible. It's a global business, and this is in the early '80s, right?
Yes, in 1990, Corvent was the largest implant company in the world, selling more, not dollar amount, but more unit amount and numbers than Nobel. And we were the only two major players. And Straumann was trying to come up with something, and they had very mediocre designs. Eventually, when they got better designs, they ran into my patents and had to pay me royalties. Same thing with Nobel, except they never paid the royalties. The Nobel Active they brought on the market in 2007 after my internal connection patent had expired.
Well, you had 33 patents in your lifetime, correct?
Yes.
Wow. So not only are you a businessman, we'll get to the serial entrepreneurship. I mean, that's in and of itself, that's staggering. But you were writing patents, you were publishing articles, you developed a business with an enormous distribution and fulfillment concept. You were manufacturing them. Jerry, I mean, seriously, this is like, you graduate as a dentist and suddenly you're a multifaceted conglomerate. Okay, so I know this is a crazy question, but how does this happen? I mean, I know you say necessity of but wait a minute. All kinds of people have great ideas. You executed.
Yes. Well, I was willing to put in the effort. I mean, I was an avid golfer, but I didn't golf for 6 years in the 80s. I was focused in on this. Once you start on that path, you got to keep going or you die. You create a demand. For instance, Implant Direct. I launched it in 2006. For 2004 to 2006, I had 80 or 90 employees that were working for me, developing this and manufacturing with no income coming in. And when it finally finished the product, I said, my goodness, I got to go out and sell this now.
Yeah, for sure.
So I got on my airplane and I went to 50 cities and gave evening lectures every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I would give a dinner lecture in a different city to a group of doctors. Then I went international. So you do it. I had a very supportive wife who worked with me and traveled with me and supported my family. And I did what needed to be done.
Crazy question, perhaps. Did you still have a practice?
No, I
No.
quit practicing in '86.
Okay.
I had the practice. I brought in 2 associates, and they would just line me up a case for a surgical demonstration.
Okay. I want to share my screen because I was going to make some notes, but I realized that there's just no way that was going to happen because too expansive, too extensive. So your biography is here. Obviously incredibly phenomenal. But 2 things jumped out in the course of this evaluation. I said before to you that I thought the lights out concept sounded to me like an eco footprint. Like, you basically were dealing with climate change back in the 80s or whenever, like in the early 2000s. So this is the industry's first lights out manufacturing facility. What did that mean?
Well, a CNC machine, the screw machines that make these implants, they need to be set up, and you usually need a person standing beside it, measuring the parts as they're coming off and making sure it's holding the tolerances. You don't want to run 100 parts that you have to throw out. So you needed operators to do that. But what my team developed was called lights out manufacturing. We had a monitor attached to every machine that put on a graph the vibrations coming off of the machine. Then we had holes drilled through the drills so we could inject under high pressure oil to the cutting tool to preserve the tool to make a couple hundred parts before it needed to be changed. And then we had fire suppressors on it in case it started on fire and there was nobody in the building. What do? You can't run a machine if there's nobody there to monitor it for fire. So we developed the processes, and we ended up with 46 machines that at 10 o'clock at night, when we're done the setups and whatever, you turn the lights off and go home. You come back the next morning, you have a couple hundred parts at every machine. And every one of them is perfect, because if they weren't, it would turn off the machine. So that's lights out manufacturing.
Incredible. So out of curiosity, who designed these machines?
Well,
You obviously had to have some sort of, what's that?
Swiss automatics, but most of them are made in Japan. Some are made in Germany. Very sophisticated, $300,000 a machine, and it just makes a fancy screw.
Interesting. Can you just walk us through basically how you came from Corvent to Paragon to Implant Direct? The stories are fascinating because it's basically mergers, acquisitions, high finance. Work at Danaher. You're dealing with venture capital people, and so once again, you're not a you don't have an MBA. You're not a you don't have background in CFO, financial. You don't have a degree from a university in finance. How did you do all this?
Well, if you take the history, it was Corvent until 1990. In 1990, Densply came to me and said, we want to distribute your product. And we don't want to buy your company, but we want to distribute your product. So I entered into a distribution agreement where they paid me 45% of US list price, and I would produce the product and they would sell it. And it turned out to be a bad deal for them because the margins weren't good enough. They paid 45%, but then they'd sell it to their distributors at a 50% discount of list price, or they had to discount. So anyways, they were committed to buy so much per month, whether they sold it or not. After 6 years, they found it better for their balance sheet if they just didn't try and sell it and put it on the shelf. So they were destroying the business because they weren't spending the money marketing. So after 6 years, I took the company back. We had litigation, and I took the company back. And in 1997, I changed the name from Corvent to Paragon, and launched a number of new products, and rebuilt the company and the growth of the company. And in 2001, Calcitech came along and bought the company from me. They later became bought by Zimmer, and then Zimmer merged with Biomet. So Zimmer Biomet today is selling the screw vent implants that I developed in 1986 and 1999. Now, interesting, I was under a non-compete with them, but my attorney told me that I gave up my right to compete, but not my right to prepare to compete. So in 2004, when they abandoned, the lease was up on the building that I was leasing them, they consolidated down in San Diego. And so I now had an empty factory and 100 employees that were out of work that knew how to make implants. So I started a new company called Implant Direct. And of course, I got sued by them for violating the non-compete. We had a big arbitration, and they lost. For 2 years, I funded 90 people building this new product line. In 2006, I launched Implant Direct, the first online resource for implants, a new product line. And what was different about Implant Direct is I wanted to add value by having all-in-one packaging.
Right.
Why did you need a sales rep to tell you what part goes with what? Or if you're an oral surgeon, you wanted the sales rep to go hold the hand of your referring doctor and tell them what part goes with what. So I said, I'm just going to put all these parts in the same package for one everyday low price. And that simplified inventory and customer service. And basically, I'm credited with creating what's known as the value segment of the implant industry. So that was in 2006 we launched. Within 4 years, we had gained such a market share that Danaher, a $25 billion public traded company who owns Cybron, came along and wanted to buy me. And we made a deal where they bought 75%. I stayed on for 3 years as president, and then they bought the other 25%. And I'm now retired, waiting for my non-compete to expire in 13 months. And the Niznick show is going to get on the road again.
You're going to go back into business at this stage in your life.
That's the plan.
Okay. This is a jaw-dropping moment. What does it cost to manufacture an implant?
I'm seeing something on the screen on the right, emails. Is that mine or yours?
I don't know. That's probably somebody sending me something.
No,
So,
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the question?
The question was, when you stick something, when you have a tube or whatever it is of titanium, put it in a machine. When that comes out as an implant, what does it cost you to manufacture?
Well, maybe 30 cents or 40 cents worth of titanium, if that. The machine, one machine could make 5,000 implants in a month. So you might be at $3 or $4 for an implant. Then you got to apply a surface to it. Then you got to package it. I was the first one that came up with fixture mount packaging in 1990, where the delivery tool, the insertion tool, is attached to the implant. And I was also the first one to come up with sterile packaging in 1990. So it's what else are you putting in the packaging? A cover screw, a carrier or insertion tool. With Implant Direct, I made the carrier multifunctional to serve as an abutment and as a transfer. We got various patents on that. All in, you might be $25.
So it costs, the manufacturing costs, including parts of an implant, is $25.
Probably a lot less than that if you're not putting multifunctional parts in with it. And but $25.
Right. So how does somebody justify $500 for sale of an implant?
They brainwash you. They pay a lot of money to organizations to get on the podiums. They buy opinion leaders. It's called unique selling proposition. They come up with a unique selling proposition, USP. What can they say is different about their product? And then they market the hell out of it, trying to convince you that that thing is the most important thing for your success. If I were to put peanut butter on an implant and go around and say, look, I'm the only guy with peanut butter on my implant, that's why the thing is successful. If I could get enough paid opinion leaders, and there's plenty of them around that'll say anything, to endorse peanut butter on the implant, I could probably add $30, $40 just for the peanut butter.
Unbelievable. One of the things that you were talking about in the upper right is Scott Gans is watching this and he keeps popping ideas at me. The first one was Corniche convertible. What's that all about?
Well, when I sold to Dentsply in 1991, So they were in doing the inventory and everything. And my one of my people came and said, well, look, we got a lot of literature. You're not going to give them the literature. And I said, well, I didn't really think about it. So I said, okay, you got to buy I told him, you have to buy the literature. And they said, okay, but we're not going to pay you more than you paid for it. So we did an inventory. I had $230,000 worth of literature, which I would have had to throw away or give it to them.
Right.
So anyways, across the street from my office was the Rolls Royce dealer. So I took that 230, went across and bought a Corniche convertible. And I said to them, you know, I gave you a gift of that literature, and see that Corniche parked over there? You just bought me that. So
I'm intrigued. You're definitely a shoot from the hip kind of guy, and yet you're dealing with all these corporate, the bean counters. They're not dentists in the upper tier who are running companies. They're basically MBAs and certified financial analysts. And you're you're not raw, but you're not a corporation. You don't think like a corporation. You're labile, right? You're free to do what you want. You don't have to have 12 different layers of people signing everything off. There's not a bazillion vice presidents. How did they deal with
get
you?
to the market very quickly with the product. But okay, acting wild and crazy with these corporations has an advantage, especially when you're negotiating with them. Um, Another negotiating story is when Danaher wanted to buy me. We negotiated the price, and I said I wanted 300 million, and they negotiated me down to 280 million. And they said, but we'll let you keep 25% of the company instead of 20. I was going to keep, and we're going to give you this company of ours to incorporate. I said, okay. Well, once we did the due diligence and we got in and we saw that their company, I can't remember the name of the implant company, was losing money. Right at the last minute, I went back. I said, I'm not doing this deal unless you give me the full 300, because you're giving me a company that's losing money. And they went for it. I mean, that was a bluff. Who's going to walk away from that kind of money over an extra 3%? So being wild and crazy has its advantages when you're dealing with straight-laced corporate guys.
I just got another message from Scott. Scott, there is a man he knows where every skeleton is buried, and he has every story. He's got to write an autobiography, just sure of everything he's ever done, every place he's ever been, everybody he's ever known. The question was marketing material. What does that mean to you? I'm not sure what he's.
The brochures. We had brochures printed up, and we were giving all that to Dentsply, and it had no value. They were buying inventory, but and they were taking over the leases. So the marketing material was just the brochures.
Interesting.
And I was getting 45% of the sale anyway, so why would I not just give them the literature? But I asked for it, and they went along with it. And that's how I got that Corniche.
What were you selling? What were you selling the implants for in Implant Direct? It was in terms of contrast, comparison, and competition. What was the cost of buying an implant from Implant Direct?
The target price originally was $150, and we kept that price for I think 6 years. Then I think it went up to 175 on some of the implants, and then we came out with newer implants with newer carriers that had different things, and it got up to $225. But when you think about it, an abutment, a transfer, a Healy collar, and a cover screw, if you listed the list price of those 4 components that they were getting along with the implant was really selling for $28.
So did the companies commit? Like, how did you get? There was obviously a point in time, and I'm not an implantologist, where Implant Direct was kind of portrayed as a discount company. I mean, Nobel and all these Strawmans and all these other people, AstraZeneca or AstraTech, they all came at you because the price point was so different. How did you deal with that?
Well, I dealt with it. I posted what their discounts were. I had a section on our website where I would have all of our salespeople that ran into their customers with discounts would fill out a form, and we had the by state, by zip code, the discounts that these companies were giving. They were the discount companies, 40%, 50%, 60% discounts. So I figured let a dentist come online, find out what discount they could get from Nobel, and go back to Nobel and ask for that discount, or Straumann, or whatever the company was. So I think dentists appreciated everyday low prices and knowing what they're getting. We're not having to negotiate prices or buy volume in order to get a reasonable price.
I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because I want everybody, I hate those little small screens which you can't move. So I'm going to, I don't know whether this is appropriate or not, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to throw out a name and you have a fantastic story. Now, I'm a Toronto boy. George Zarb was 1981, did the retrospective study. He went to Albrechtsen and Brandemark, and he said, I want to bring this to North America. You'd already done this. You had already basically started Corvan around the same time.
Yes, 82, I was on the market, and I designed the Corvan without ever hearing of the Nobel product. A good thing, because I probably would have used pure titanium instead of an alloy and a machine surface instead of blasted, and wouldn't have had the success that I did.
So tell me about George Zarb, who I love and adore, and his erudition is staggering. But tell me about George Zarb.
I have had a love-hate relationship to begin with, but now we're very respectful and friendly when we see each other. But in 1983, or 82, I was going to Toronto to exhibit at the Ontario Dental Society, and I wrote George Zarb a letter, and I said, we've never met. I'm a Canadian, also prosthodontist, interested in implants like you, and I'd like to meet with you when I come to Toronto. He wrote me back a very snarky letter saying, thank you for the very informative form letter and sales pitch. When you have 5 years of research, contact me. Okay, so that was my experience with George Zarb. Later on in 86, when Implant Direct or Corvent was getting success, the Nobel wanted to stop me, and they eventually tried to stop 3i also. So they sued me for infringing their patent. That patent was later declared invalid by fraud on the US Patent Office. It was a BS patent about the size of micropits being the secret of osseointegration. So they sued me, and we got into discovery. And one of the things I got a hold of was the University of Toronto results of the replication study. Now, the study, this was probably in 88. And so the study was 7 or 8 years into it, and they'd never published the results. And when I looked at the results, I realized that they had not had very good success, and they were waiting till they could add more cases to make the failures, minimize the failures. So I was at a perio meeting where Zarb was lecturing in New York, and I put together a 4-page document that analyzed University of Toronto George Zarb replication study, and the heading was George Zarb study fails to meet Zarb's criteria of success. And I printed that out, and at my little booth, we were handing it out. And at the break, I saw George there, and he came up to me, and I said, "Here, George, I have something prepared for you." I said, "Now this is an informative form letter and sales pitch." And he went bonkers. When he came back on the podium, he said, "You're going to see something, but don't believe everything you see." And he was really flustered about me letting the cat out of the bag in that one. So that's that story.
An interesting story. No, that's quite fantastic. So I'm curious.
One more part of that litigation was we countersued Nobel for false advertising, claiming that Brandemark discovered osseointegration. in his 77 textbook, he credited Leventhal, a French orthopedist, in 1951 article for osseointegration. So when they were saying Brånemark discovered osseointegration, we sued them. And as part of the settlement, I took a license on their patent, and they got the right to say I was licensed under Brånemark's patent for 5 years. And they had to stop saying that Brånemark discovered osseointegration.
Really?
They slipped back into that years later, but.
Okay, so out of curiosity, I'm going to go through the controversies in a little bit because, with all due respect to Nobel, you've taken them on repeatedly. Like that seems to be, you guys are like, jousting on a fairly constant basis. It's quite fascinating. So, in terms of, I'm curious. I want to go back for a second. I want to share my screen because something really jumped out at me early on. Here's where, whoops, that's not what I wanted to see. What did I do wrong here? I did something wrong. Nope. It was, there we go. That was part of it. And then there was, no, I've lost it. I apologize.
What are you looking for?
I was looking for the timeline for everything that you did. The timeline.
Go up.
Ah, sorry. I didn't lose it. There we are. I found it. So look at these timelines in terms of your development. 1982 to 2000, 1986 to 2000. Jerry, there's like literally year after year after year after year, you're producing different products. So, I mean, how is this possible? You were designing, you were coming up with all these innovations, different surfaces, different coatings. Jerry, seriously, like this is amazing. What am I looking at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's what? There's got to be 20 plus implant designs that have changed over the course of that period.
Well, it's evolution. You see what the competition is doing. You see where there's good ideas. Something isn't working the way you want it. You change it. The advantage I had, there was no committees at our company. It was me. I never had a partner, never had any investors. So I could just say, do this and do that, and come to the market very quickly. Developed by the 1999, developed the tapered screw vent, which has become the cornerstone of all modern implant design. It has the internal hex connection, which I developed in '86, and the taper, and then I wrote an article in 2000 on the optimizing success in soft bone by undersizing the sockets, and just a constant search to improve. And this is lacking in the major companies because they're looking, they want to come up with a new product, so they have to find an opinion leader who will validate the product. Well, may not be smart enough to know who has the good idea and who has a bad idea.
Right.
But they need new products in order to raise their prices and stay relevant.
So
when I came up with a new product, it was to give a benefit.
So I'm curious, all of these companies over the course of time have come up with acid etched and blasted and all these surfaces. And do you have a smooth collar? Do you have, like BioHorizon had the ring, so you got tissue attachment? Tell me, but does that, I know it has to matter on some level, but your take on all this over the course of time in terms of the difference in the surfaces, have you changed your surfaces dramatically over the course of time?
What happened is in 1982, I came up with the blasted and etched surface, the core vent. And then Nobel's paid opinion leaders start writing articles to critique it. They claimed that the implants weren't machined, they were cast because they were rough, or they're rough from the blasting. Then they claimed that the blasting with it had an alloy, so they claimed it wasn't really titanium. So in 1986, I decided to acid etch the implants with hydrofluoric acid, which created an absolute clean pitted surface. I got away from the blasted and etched surface, which is what Straumann has today. And I went to acid etch, which worked fine on pure titanium, But then we started to have some fractures with an internal connection, small diameter, pure titanium implant. So I went to the alloy in 1990, and when you etch alloy, it doesn't create the same kind of pits. So I went to blasting with HA crystals, which is water soluble. So you don't need to acid etch it after. You blast it with HA crystals and then just dissolve it off. And that's the surface I've had since 1991. And it's a surface that most companies today have.
I'm curious, like, the research that's being done, there are examples here of histology and such. You were doing the research, or you
No,
had,
universities, different.
you
I
were,
would provide implants and not even provide funding, just provide the products. And different people did research and documented the results.
fantastic. I'm curious, the one thing I don't see here is the bone level concept of Straumann. I'm, what do you think of that? What do you think of the bone level implant?
Um, I think it's very, you mean the tissue
The
level or the
tissue,
bone?
sorry, the tissue level, not the bone level. Tissue level.
I credit Straumann with proving that you don't need to bury an implant to make it successful. Interesting story. A year and a half ago, Straumann executives invited me to come over to Bern, Switzerland, to lecture to their executives on how I developed the value segment of the market. So and I said, the first thing you do is put in value. If you've got a $400 implant and you drop the price to 200, you've not added value. You've just lowered the price. So value is in the packaging and the delivery systems. So I think that there's no reason to bury an implant unless you're doing bone grafting around it.
Interesting.
And that led me to the development of a number of Implant Direct products. If you're not going to bury the implant, then why not make the top of the implant an abutment? So Implant Direct had a number of one-piece implants that were the abutment. If you want a cemented restoration, there was a straight abutment. If you want an angled, there was an angled abutment. If you wanted an overdenture, there was a zest type abutment on it, or a multi-unit abutment. So that was adding value. You didn't have to buy the abutment. It was part of the implant. You didn't have to attach it. And that's proved very successful.
What are your thoughts on ceramic implants, Jerry?
I don't know what problem it solves, but I can envision which problem it creates.
Okay.
And they're more fragile. You can't put high torque on it when you're inserting it. You can't tighten the screw. You're very limited in your prosthetics. Most of them are made straight because they don't want to put too much torque on the implant when you're inserting it. And very important in soft bone to be able to compress the bone and increase the initial stability. So I think it's ceramic implants are useless.
Whoops. I mean, okay. So before we move on, sorry.
And I posted that.
Oh, yeah, well, we're going to talk controversies in just a, just a minute. Okay, so we're going to move out of implants in just a moment. I'm trying to remember. I just lost my train of thought. Relative. Oh, I know. Immediate placement.
Absolutely. I think I developed the process in 1980. 82, when I would take out a tooth, there was a socket there. I would curette it, get down to fresh bone, resize it, or go a little deeper and put an implant in. And I could do it with Corvent because Corvent had 3 diameters. It started out just with a 5.5, which was actually 6.3 to the outside of the threads, whereas the other implants didn't have wide diameter implants at the time. So I would go into the socket, get good stability, and had the same success, and avoided the trauma of a second surgery.
So we're going to talk briefly on your philanthropy. What's your relationship with the Veterans Administration in the United States?
Well, nothing now, but I funded the treatment of over 900 vets, receiving 2,700 of my implants in a multi-center prospective randomized, double peer-reviewed study. The papers that came out of that study created a special issue of the Oral Surgery Journal, and then later a special issue of the Perio Journal. So I spent about $4 million funding that study that really generated a lot of scientific results. One of them was how successful HA-coated implants were, whether the patient was a smoker, was diabetic, even post-radiation, whether the operator was experienced or inexperienced. Success rates with the HA were very high, and that probably attributed more to the roughness of the surface than to the HA itself. And that's what led me to go to a rougher blasted surface after I saw those results.
I'm going to stop for a second because there's two things that, well, again, your career. So, you are a hotelier, and is that how you say it? Hotelier.
Yes.
Hotel, yeah. And you are also now a convention center owner, builder, whatever. And this is in Connecticut, Bristol, Connecticut. So, in the midst of all of this, you're living in Hawaii, and you decide you're going to set up you've got your own educational center. You can stay at the hotel, you can go to the convention center, and you're living in Hawaii. Like, why did this become something of interest?
Well, just to correct it, my legal residence is Las Vegas, Nevada, but I live in Los Angeles and have a home in Hawaii. With COVID, I've spent 6 months here this year.
Okay.
I don't normally spend this much time here, but about 15 years ago, I was doing what was called hard money loans, where you get high interest and you're the bridge financer on various real estate. And I lent somebody money to buy a hotel, and when he didn't pay me, I took back the hotel. I couldn't sell it, so I did a major renovation on it and turned it into a Beverly Hills boutique hotel in the middle of Bristol, Connecticut, which is the home of ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
And about a year and a half ago or a year ago, I got the idea to expand the operation. I bought 6 acres, and we're now building an extended stay hotel and a 55,000 square foot event center, all attached to my original hotel.
And I take it it's totally digital and all that kind of good stuff. It's
Oh,
going to
yes.
be state of the art.
The convention center will have these large digital screens. It'll be high tech, and maybe we'll have some dental meetings there. I don't know.
I would think so. I would think so. So I'm gonna go back for a second just to show people what it looks like, because it's quite fascinating what you're doing. I mean, to me, it's like mind blowing. Okay, DoubleTree by Hilton. This is it, right? This is
Yes.
wow. I mean, heavens. So how is COVID affecting you with this? Are you coping?
With the hotel?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our occupancy dropped to about 15%, but we just got our second COVID PPP check from the government, which is helping.
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting to bounce back now. Right now at the hotel, it's McEnroe, the tennis player, is staying there for 2 weeks. ESPN brought in 20 people because the Australian Open is going on, and they're going to moderate it from Bristol, Connecticut, instead of sending all these people to Australia. So the COVID did me a favor in that regard, where people aren't traveling, and they're using our hotel more for things like that.
Next on the line of entrepreneurial activities, Acromil. You manufacture airplane parts for the U.S. Air Force, and because it's also got a Navy version, for Northrop, Boeing, and Lockheed. And you manufacture the wings or just the tips for the 777.
The 77, we make a lot of big structural parts for all the primes, even the European airplanes. And the way that business works is they give you a bid. it's very reassuring to know that these planes are built by the 100 lowest bidders.
Yeah.
So they give you a contract. Now, when you get into more complex parts, they're more choosy because not everybody can make them. So
Right.
we've been very fortunate to get a lot of awards from Lockheed and Northrop and Boeing and other Bell helicopters. So I have 2 factories, about 200 employees, and we make big structural parts, some of them as big as 14 feet long.
So 200 employees, a 200,000 square foot facility.
Right.
And what I'm fascinated about is you build parts for the F-35, right?
Yes.
The latest American fighter plane. It's zero signature. It's supposed to be the best fighter in the world. So what do you have to do with the DoD to be allowed to manufacture these parts?
Well, they certify the hell out of you. I mean, they need to look at your quality control. We have a whole room that measures parts. A needle moves along and touches parts. You need to give them all the reports to show the quality control. When they get a part, they want to know that it's 100%. And if you're not, they send it back, and they eventually stop dealing with you. So they've come to us with the most difficult parts.
So do you have to get a security clearance?
No,
No.
no.
And they're not worried about somebody hacking your computer systems from an unnamed company, an unnamed country.
Individual parts wouldn't do anybody any good.
Okay, okay.
Anybody could, the parts that they control, that were the real technology, the panels and the control systems. I don't know what the restrictions are on those manufacturers, or if they do that all in-house. But we're just making structural parts. For instance, the 777X, 777X, which is the latest Boeing plane, which has the wing tips that tip up.
Yeah.
We make the part that tips those wings up. We make the thrust reversers for that plane.
The landing gear struts and a few other goodies along the way.
For the Gulfstream 650, we make those parts. It's all on the website. A lot of interesting parts and processes.
I'll show the website in a minute, but what fascinates me once again is conceptually, manufacturing and this sort of thing, manufacturing as a model is one thing, but how do you get into a company of that context? I mean, you're building parts for an airplane. Yeah. How do you do this, Jared?
Well, I sure didn't start a business like that. What happened is a company got in financial trouble and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And I went in and bought its bank debt. He had 11 million in bank debt. I bought it for 3. And then we go to the bankruptcy court and we pay the other creditors 10 cents or 11 cents on the dollar, make a deal with the bankruptcy attorney, and you take it out of bankruptcy. And now I own the company. And then you've got, maybe we had 40 employees at the time. And then you start building the organization. We expanded, we bought newer equipment, we trained new people, hired more people. We got up to 200. Before COVID, we had 240 people working for us. 2 years ago, another aerospace company in the area got in trouble with the government, and we bought that company and almost doubled our capacity. So it's not nearly as lucrative as dental implants.
Well, okay, so I'm curious. Do you know? Are you involved in the design, or do you obviously you oversee it? And you must have, like you said, your son-in-law is involved in this.
My son-in-law is the CFO. No, we don't design anything. It's build to their prints. They send you a model. You bring it up on the screen. You figure out how you're going to program it, make it. You come up with a price. Then they beat you up, and then if you're lucky, you get the contract, and then you make it. And hopefully, you hope that you bid right, because if you bid wrong, you're going to lose money, and we've had that experience too. So it's a business. If you have deep pockets and can withstand how they drag out the payments and the investments that are needed, I mean, one machine can cost $4 million. We built an addition to the factory and added 2 of those machines. Scott Gans was there, and I got
He
a picture.
was. He told me the story. You had lunch on a wing or something, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah.
Interesting. I'm curious though, how much 3D printing? I know that they were saying when they used to build the rotors on the Bell helicopters, they were 3D printing them. And in contrast to building the prototype, which took weeks or a month, the 3D printing took 3 days to get these parts for testing and evaluation.
Well, there are some companies that do composite. We don't. We just machine titanium, aluminum, and steel. So we're not into composites and printing.
Okay. I'm going to go back for a moment. Let me share my screen because I just wanted to show everybody what Acromil was. Serving the air since 1959, you bought the company, and then there was all these parts, the assemblies, machining, and engineering. Jerry, I mean, obviously extraordinary. It just boggles the mind what you have entered into. Now,
The message is that there's no limit to what you can take on. And people, should strive, I think, to optimize their efforts. I'm still taking on projects. Again, if I start back in the implant industry, that's hiring 100 employees and buying machines and supervising design engineers. And I'm going to be, I'm 78. So I'll be 80 by the time I hit the market with implants, and I'm going strong.
so your restrictive covenant is what, a little over a year right now?
Yes, 13 months, 13 and a half months.
So is the industry quaking in their boots with regard to you returning?
I don't know, but they're certainly anticipating it.
Well,
Well,
it's
you mentioned Nobel. The funny thing, the story, and that final story is not written yet, but it started in '84 when Nobel sent out a letter to all oral surgeons saying they were dismayed that somebody would be quoting Brånemark's research. And then I responded by saying Brånemark didn't prove that a specific design or material worked. They just proved that if you get osseointegration, you had long-term predictability. We've achieved that. And then in '86, they sued me for patent infringement, spent me into the ground where I had to take a license. They sued 3i, and I helped 3i in their litigation, and the patent was declared invalid by fraud. It's been going on like this. Now, what happened, the poetic justice of all this is that in the end of 2014, after Danaher bought me out completely, they bought Nobel. And by 2017, Nobel was managing Implant Direct, the company that I started. So today, all the Implant Direct products are being shipped out of Nobel's factory. Let me close this. They are controlling and really, I think, interfering with the success of Implant Direct. They don't want Implant Direct to compete directly for their customers. So they've made Implant Direct a very soft target. I wouldn't probably be coming back if Implant Direct was continuing on its path of success. But the Implant Direct customers are not, I think, being treated as well as they should be, with the lack of new products, lack of a sales force and customer support. And it just creates a great opportunity that I need to address.
I'm curious. I know I can't remember the name. If I come up with the acronym, Nobel has, what do they call it? DTX. They've gotten into all of these ancillary digital. Is that what it is? DTX?
Yes. It's a guided way to place implants.
How do you feel about that?
Look, if you got a first molar and a first bicuspid, and you're going to place a second bicuspid implant, what's the question? You can't go mesiodistal more than you're supposed to. Buccolingually, you're limited by the width of the ridge. You know where the mandibular canal is. You can see it on an X-ray and measure its depth. Put the implant in. Guided surgery, I think, is a great benefit in totally edentulous cases, especially if you're trying to avoid the sinus and you need to angle the implants. But to make a guided surgery for single teeth, or for you're in the symphysis, you got the symphysis. How difficult is it to put two implants where the lower cuspids were? And you don't even need to get them parallel, but how difficult is it to get it parallel? If we can parallel a 6-unit bridge, with pin ledge restorations, I think we can parallel two implants, which don't even need to be parallel for the overdenture attachments. So my point is, I think it has its place, but I think it's just being over marketed. And I think people are doing it for bragging rights more than anything else, for marketing rights.
Well, you don't suffer fools, do you? You just go at it. I mean, there are a lot of people probably, well, whoever's watching this is probably sitting there going, huh? It's I'm curious. So I'm curious. You keep referring to locators or zest anchors. The study that was done in Canada was out of McGill. They used 2 locators to determine retention. I know Jacques Bernier in Quebec City was into this. Did you have anything to do with this at that time? Do you know what I'm referring to?
No, but I actually started with what got me going and developing my own implant was Max Zest asked me to come up with an implant to take a Zest attachment. So I told him what to do, and we did it, and then that led me to get into the implant business. Then I came up with the Go Direct implant in 2006 when I launched Implant Direct. It was a one-piece implant with a locator platform on it, and Zest later came out with their implant with a locator. So I'm very much into overdenture attachments.
Interesting. This is the list of your latest controversies all the way up to February, obviously this month. Again, a take no prisoners approach. Overuse of zygomatic and angled implants. Let's start with that one.
Okay.
I assume I can go back to it. So this is the conversation. You think there is a problem with all this. You are overcomplicating some of your treatment plans with the use of angled implants and zygomatic implants. Comment?
Well, you see there's 2 zygomatic implants. Those are the ones that go angled back into the zygoma, and they end up with a very long cantilever to the implant. You got the tip of the implant engaging the zygoma, and then all this implant hanging out there. And I was just showing that he had enough bone to put 6 implants in the front. I added 2 implants in between the ones that he had, and that would have been enough to do the case. He didn't need to do zygomatic implants. He just needed to use the anterior bone that he had available.
All right, let me go back for a second. There's a lot of Nobel in all of this. Nobel Active, Zimmer Biomet, this, that, and the other. What? So this is how you were challenging their claims? This is what you're doing? Like you don't have any qualms about doing this. So Nobel's questionable N1 implant innovations, going back to June. I mean, okay, so what was this all about? You were challenging, where are we here? I love it. You don't care, like boom, boom, you go after them. Claims trioval conical connection. So this is part of what you're doing. This is obviously very important to you. You're challenging and questioning the marketing claims of these companies. So what was your concern about, for example, this N1 implant?
Well, for one thing, they cite a research, and then most people don't read the research. So I went and read the research, and they're claiming it has greater stability, but what their study shows is the threads stuck out farther than with their control implant. So that's why they had greater stability. Go down. Is there another page to that?
There is, sure.
Is there another one? Let's see.
That's where I stopped. That's number
Okay.
4.
Well, and when I figured out the real Achilles heel of this implant, and that is that it has a non-circular internal connection. So you can't put a one-piece abutment. You couldn't screw a one-piece abutment into it. So after I published this, there's probably another link somewhere called the Achilles heel of the
Yep.
N1 implant.
Yep. Up here.
Okay, click on that. You'll see what I mean. Okay, so there's their connection. And I said, gee, I figured it out. What good is an implant if you can't screw a one-piece healing collar into it or a one-piece abutment? So bottom line is they post things on LinkedIn and their opinion leaders come on and give endorsements. And then I follow up with the comments section, and then I capture it because a lot of times they pull it down very quickly. So I then capture it and put it into a PDF and then post it myself.
So I'm curious, in all of these, can they come back at you?
Nobody's threatened me so far. If
Okay.
you're telling, and I've been doing this for decades. If you tell the truth, there's not much they can do.
There you go. If you tell the truth, it's the only thing you never have to remember.
Right.
So the last thing, would you change dentistry if you had 3 wishes? What would those wishes be? I mean, I know it's been answered here, but I'm not going to show it. Let's get out of here and go back to having fun.
Um, I mean, my big bugaboo is paid opinion leaders who will endorse products and say whatever the manufacturer want them to say, and therefore mislead their colleagues. So that's the one thing that I personally take on and have done so. We're going now into the 4th decade of doing this from 1984 to now. I've been doing this. And if you go onto that website, we have all the controversies archived by decade. So this goes way back. So that's the only thing. I think dentistry is beautiful. I think it's coming along great with the technology and the printers and the digital dentistry. And I think dental implants have been proven to work a very high success rate. One study with our implant was 100%. You can't rely on studies because it's a matter of did that person pick their cases? Did they report on consecutive placed implants? But basically, we know implants work and it's changed dentistry, and I'm happy to have played a significant role in that and still think I have something I can contribute.
I think so. So you've got a retrospective legacy. So I mean, in addition to what you're planning on doing, what's your prospective legacy? How much more do you want to do in the dental field?
Well, I want to get back into the dental implant business, and I have we'll see what happens. I have a few ideas. I think basically, I think the prosthetics needs to be simplified, and the cost needs to be brought down and in control. And I think that I have the credibility to be able to offer a low-priced implant that people would have confidence in.
Fantastic. So before I let you go, there's a great story that I would hope that you can share relatively easily. You love to build homes. You and your wife love to build homes. But your home in Las Vegas has an interesting story. Could you share that, please?
Yes, in 1993, when Dentsply took over 91, we moved to Las Vegas. I was basically semi-retired. I manufactured the product for them, but I didn't have to do much else than that. My staff could do that. So I bought a good-sized lot and built a big Italian villa there. And one day I got a knock on the door from the broker that had sold me the lot. Do you want to sell the house? I said, no, it's not for sale. Well, if you were going to sell it, what would you ask? And I gave him some ridiculous number. And he came back, and a half hour later, he said, it's a done deal. Can you be out of here in a week? And I took the toothbrush and we left. And it was actually it's Las Vegas sale, but it was written up in Los Angeles business section as the highest price home that sold in Las Vegas. And it was sold to the Sultan of Brunei
There
for
we
his
go.
mistress.
There, the
And we
Sultan
went
of
back
Brunei.
and visited the house a few years ago, and she's still there and very friendly. She's no longer his mistress, but she and her kid are there, and she was very nice and enjoying the house.
He bought it for the mistress.
Bought it for the mistress.
Okay, well, that's an interesting perspective. Jerry, thank you. This has been a phenomenal walk through the history of dentistry, or at least the history of what represents the sort of foundational aspect of dentistry today. Endodontics is coming back, but implants will always be in the forefront. There's obviously the pendulum swing, but thank you for what you brought to dentistry, because going back 40 years, you changed its face, which is really kind of extraordinary.
Thank you. Thank you.
You
I'll
changed
make
its
you
face.
feel at home.
Yeah.
Here.
Now, everybody makes fun of endodonts because I've got calluses on both these fingers. This was a privilege. I'm sorry I had to get you up so early in the morning.
My pleasure. Keep up the good work, and
Thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
very pleased to join you this morning.
Jerry, this was a pleasure. Where's Scott Gans? Scott, give him a call. I'm sure Scott wants to talk to you right now. He's like a good friend. That's amazing. Anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate everything you've done, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with everybody today.
Give my regards to George Zarb if you see him.
I don't think so. He's retired. He's probably living in his caboose up in northern Ontario. He bought a car. He bought a caboose, and that's what he lives in. He was a very inventive guy, George, for sure. Take care. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy everything. Enjoy your family, and enjoy Hawaii as long as it requires, because you couldn't be in a nicer place.
Thank you. Stay safe.
I will, and you as well.